Welcome to the Strength for the Day podcast, which is a daily Bible study with Dennis Fountain. We hope this time together will be challenging, sharpening, uplifting, encouraging, and strengthening to your Christian walk. Thank you for joining us, and we pray you are helped through today's study. Well, good morning, and welcome to one more episode of Strength for the Day, and I hope your week is going well. If you're from our church, I would ask you if you would be praying for teen camp this week, and a bunch of kids loaded up yesterday and drove up to youth camp, or down to youth camp in Goldendale, Washington, and so if you would just be praying for our teenagers this week, and for God to have His way in the hearts of young people, as well as the adults that are there. We're going to have a great week down there, and so if you would just be praying for all of us down there as well. So the episode that we're jumping into today is really just one. We have this one and then three more after it, and we will conclude our study here in the book of 1 Timothy. If you remember back to yesterday's episode or the last episode, Paul is encouraging Timothy in serving, and of course talking to Timothy about building people in service. But Paul concludes that section by a statement in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse number 5, where Paul says this, that there are those that think that godliness is a means of gain. From such withdraw yourself. So there were some people that thinking that they could use their godliness, their righteousness, they could use their righteous actions to get things, and that they could acquire more through their faith. We need to know that because of what Paul says next. So jump in, if you would, to 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 6 down through verse number 10. We read these words. Now, godliness with contentment, Paul says, that is great gain. Because we brought nothing into this world, and it's certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. But those who desire to be rich, they fall into temptation and to snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. So there's this contingency within the Christian faith that Paul is writing about, that they think that their Christianity is a means to gain more. There is that type of Christianity even today. People that try to use their Christianity as a way of financial growth. And you can think about the crowd, it's called the prosperity gospel, that, if you're walking with God and right with God, then you will have more, because godliness is great gain. And they take out godliness with contentment is great gain. So what is Paul writing about in this passage? Paul is writing some warnings about being driven by a covetous spirit, being driven by a desire for more all the time. Unfortunately, don't we just live with that in our culture? I mean, we live and we are surrounded by the idea of getting more all of the time. And so here's what Paul is encouraging Timothy and the readers and us in. That is, learn to be content and learn to safeguard or protect yourself from covetousness. You see, when Paul looks at verse number 10, he says this, that writes this, that the love of money is the root of all evil. There are all kinds of evil, from which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and they've pierced themselves through with many sorrows. What is this? This is a warning about the dangers of being driven by a covetous spirit. The opposite of being covetous is being content. What is contentment? Well, contentment looks at the things I have and says, I'm good. I don't need a lot more. I'm good. But covetous covetousness or someone who is continually driven by the love of money, that person says, I need more, give me, give me, give me. They have that, Patrick the Pirate used to call it a case of the gimmies. Well, here's what Paul warns against. Don't be in the group with the case of the give-me's. Be in the group who is content. And there's some warnings that I see in this passage. The first one I see that Paul, he shares a few thoughts on covetousness and contentment. The first one is this, that wealth does not bring contentment. The word contentment means an inner sufficiency that keeps us at peace in spite of our outward circumstances. Well, wealth really does not provide contentment. You look at just Hollywood or some of our athletes and all of that. Man, many of them end up in a bankrupt and just at a point of despair in their life, and all of it driven by the desire for more and that greedy spirit. And so here's Paul writing, hey, make sure that your contentment is not being driven by a desire for more. True contentment comes from godliness in the heart. One man said it this way, true contentment comes from godliness in the heart, not wealth in the hand. It comes from godliness in the heart, not wealth in the hand. Why? Because true contentment rests in a trust in God. I see that wealth does not bring contentment. I also see that wealth is not lasting. Look at verse number 7. Paul says, we brought nothing into this world, and it's certain we can carry nothing out. Man, when we die, it's done. It's gone. Our wealth is gone. It's not going to help us anymore. It's not going to benefit us in heaven, except for what we read in Matthew chapter number 6 and in Luke chapter number 12, that what we invest into heaven, that is what matters. But in this passage, Paul is simply helping us understand you can't take it with you. And so we always know the answer to a question of how much did someone leave behind when they die? Well, they left everything behind. Why? You can't take it with you. So Paul's given us some warning thoughts, some helpful tips on dealing with covetousness in our life. We won't be we won't be covetous when we realize that wealth is not the provider of my contentment. We will fight against covetousness when we recognize that wealth is not lasting. And we will fight against covetousness when we instill this idea that we can be content with our basic needs being met. Man, we can be content. Really, wealth is our basic needs being met. You are a rich person if you are a person whose needs are continually met. Thinking about where we live in, those of you that are watching or listening in the United States, we are in one of the richest nations in the world. As a matter of fact, and I think I've said this before, but statistics show that our poorest in our world, the homeless and destitute in our United States, are more wealthy and have more than many of the countries in the world. And so we have to recognize that having our basic needs met, that's actually pretty wealthy. To have food and to have clothes and to have shelter and then maybe to have a vehicle. And I look at many of us are blessed way beyond what we deserve. And so we need to recognize that wealth can be just having our basic needs met. And then the last thing I see Paul given a warning on is that the desire for wealth, it can lead to sin. The love of money is the root of all types of evil. It doesn't say that the loving money is in and of itself a sin, but the love of money can drive someone to sin. So I would say this, to prioritize money over God is sin. To protect our finances and have a financial care, that is not sin. There's a lot of principles about laying in store and about saving and a lot of principles about what we do with our money. So Paul is not writing here, hey, to have money is a sin. No, to be driven by money, the love of money, the adoration, the worship of money, That is what leads to sin. So when we put money before God, we're sinning. So what's the challenge? The challenge is don't be driven by the need for more and driven by the need for wealth. And don't think that if I get more, then I'll be satisfied, then I'll be content. No, recognize that godliness coupled with contentment, that is a great gain. That is when you're a wealthy person. Why? Because I'm content with the Lord. I know that wealth won't bring me contentment. I know my wealth won't last. I recognize that I'm actually a wealthy person when my needs are met, and I am not going to be driven by the love of money, the love for more wealth. So there's a great challenge in these verses on contentment versus covetousness. Here's my question for you today as we close. Which one do you fall into? Are you content? Or are you a covetous person? Maybe today you would look in your life and you'd say, man, lately I've been greedy, I've been covetous, I've been desiring to have more. Listen, again, there's nothing wrong with saving. There's nothing wrong with buying new things. But my motive in it, if my motive is I'm going to find contentment in things that I have, man, I'm being driven by that love of money. So recognize today that godliness with contentment, that is real gain. We'll see you tomorrow as we pick up in 1 Timothy chapter number 6 and verse number 11. Have a great weekend, or a great day. Not weekend, it's not there yet. A great day. We'll see you tomorrow.